Michael, it's been amazing. I just met you this past year.
Yes.
Just getting to know you and the story of this company has been so encouraging. And I think all of us have benefited this afternoon just from your being able to tell this story. I'm interested that you and Don both took money off the table for yourselves in order to create a more just environment. And I'm curious whether at those moments of decision to actually give up profit and opportunity, has there been anyone who's tried to wave the flag and say, wait, we can't explain this? Or has there been any pushback, either from your investors or even from your own employees?
Strangely enough, no. I mean, or not that overt. As I said, we never really considered, on the case of defeasance, we never really considered it, partly because it did go against our values. We had worked so hard to build these trusting relationships with people, and you realize that just destroys everything. People come to Chatham. I mean, we filter heavily when people come to our company for values and purposes. Yes, we care about competency, we care about results very much, but we care about integrity and we care about their intentions, their motivations. So we've been able to build a team and a senior leadership team that is very committed to these kind of values. So while there's some things, the story that I presented obviously was a very black, or at least it sounded very black and white, and in the truth be told, there's definitely some gray in there. But there's a lot of other areas where there is good gray. And what I found is every time there is gray, the discussions, which get sometimes heated, but the discussions help to define our values. So, in other words, if it's extreme easy, those are the easy ones. Like, oh, can we embezzle and do this? Well, that's easy. Okay.
Shoot, no.
And then there's some that are clearly there. It's the ones in the middle that you're like, I don't know. Like when that guy threw the flag, that was how much information did we owe that client? It was a very debatable thing, but it helped us to understand better where what those values are actually about.
I would think that maybe all along, but certainly at this stage, a huge part of your job has to be thinking about people and how to develop people. And you're in an industry that is kind of renowned for unhappy people, especially at the junior level. I mean, there's been a lot of conversation in the financial industry recently about just how unhealthy and unhappy many junior folks in this field are. What do you see as you look at especially younger employees? What are the things that contribute to flourishing for them, and what are the things that inhibit flourishing or prevent them from flourishing?
I think that probably the biggest thing is the environment you create. And the way that I think about it is really that the metaphor is, in a way, we have a river, and there's a river that is flowing in a certain direction. And what we're trying to do is create an environment that increases the speed of the river in a way, so that when people are in the river swimming, the natural current is taking them in a way that brings out the best of their humanity. And I'd say the best as being the image bearer they should be. I think the reason a lot of people are unhappy is because they're in environments where you have to be a really strong swimmer to swim against the current. So there's a current. There's great people who, I have friends who are such great people working in really toxic environments in New York, and some are in decent environments. But the ones that are working in the toxic environments, they're surviving, but they're really getting tired because they're swimming so hard just to stay in place or maybe move a little bit. But if they just kind of relax and let go, that just takes them down a direction that they don't want. And so part of what we're trying to do is create a current that allows people to swim with the current. And so young people, when we're interviewing, when we're bringing people in, we're trying to assess which direction do you really want to swim. If you want to swim the other way, I would want somebody at Chatham, we have them, who are swimming against our stream, and they usually won't last very long.
Now, in order to create that environment, you yourself, you're in a broader environment where there are currents. you are exposed to those currents.
Yes.
So you have to be able to swim. What has made it possible for you to swim in the direction that you've gone?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing is we, for the first 10, 15 years, we were totally under the radar screen. We basically were in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, and we played the shucks. We're just a bunch of hillbillies from Pennsylvania.
Bunch of mushrooms,
and
really?
bunch of mushroom guys. And we played that, and a lot of banks did not take us seriously. And so what was happening is we had a really good client base to the place where our clients so deeply trusted us that there was one case where a big bank that will remain nameless had done a financing for a acquisition, and they specifically in their financing said it was over $1 billion in the financing, and they specifically said you may not hire Chatham. And the answer, or the question right away with our client, this was, I mean, it scared us half to death, because if the banks decided we're cutting these guys out, they could have cut us out. So this was a really pivotal moment for us. And what happened is the client just so deeply believed in what we did that they basically said to the bank, why? And they're like, well, you don't need them. And they're like, that's our call. And really the bank didn't have much to say, except because if they bring their expertise to bear, we won't be able to make as much money on you. And that's not really a good thing that the bank would say. So
When you put it that way.
yeah. So that didn't work. And again, I don't want to paint, because there's so many good people that we deal with on a day-to-day on a day-to-day basis on big New York investment banks or banks. They're really good folks. So this is not all the time or everyone. It's just some of these specific. Sure. But that was a case where a bank said, get rid of them. They were out to kind of get us. But we stayed under the radar screen long enough to get enough market power, that we were once we were kind of above the radar screen, it's too late.
For you, let me push a little bit on that. For you personally, just under the pressures that you're under, what keeps you, I don't know whether this is spiritual disciplines that are important or relationships, or what keeps you swimming in the right direction as a person?
That's a good question. I think some of the things is that, first of all, I believe we're doing good work. I really believe in what we're doing. And I'm thoroughly convinced of that. And so I'm very mission oriented in terms of what we do. Also, the deeper I read and the more that I'm in conferences like this and meeting people like Lisa and the Pittsburgh Leadership Foundation, the more that I'm having community with people who are kind of fighting that, the more I'm like, it doesn't feel like you're fighting alone. It's like when I met Don Flo for the first time, I was like, wow, here's somebody who I actually feel like I resonate with. And that has just been really good. And the more I read in the Bible, the more it just comes to light. And then books like yours and other books that are coming out.
But
mostly yours. There's one or two others that I've read. But give you the vocabulary to help you understand it. And the other side is, like I said, it's when I went from being a kind of a legalistic Christian, that's the paradigm, and it shook the paradigm, and really it was a grace paradigm. That it was like a new light. It was like I said, I was reading the Bible for the first time, and as I get deeper in this, when I read the Bible, these concepts just jump off the page at me, and it just, again, more and more gives me certainty and that this is really my calling. It's what God's called me to do.
Wow. One last question, kind of more of a macro question, because I know you think about the global financial system and markets more broadly. You mentioned 15% of derivatives is risk mitigation, and 85, I guess, is various kinds of speculation. So I'm wondering if you can give us, what do you make of kind of the image bearing and the idolatry in the way that we have structured our financial system? I realize that's a huge question, but what are you noticing, worrying about, or reassured by, maybe, as you look at the system that all of us are embedded in?
that doesn't happen in 3 minutes. But it is a problem because the structure of our system is built in such a way that people who know how to navigate that system well gain strength and power, and it is ever increasing. And I'm not popular for saying this in many different audiences, but I do look and say, there's a lot of things about capitalism, and I'm a total capitalist, but there's a lot of things about capitalism right now that I feel is in trouble. And it's because some of the normal, as globalization happens and the power, whether it's media stars, sports stars, whether it's hedge funds that can move billions of dollars and bring countries to their knees, the powers are increasing. And the normal powers that were mitigating that, which are, in a normal capitalistic society where you have just normal powers mitigate, those are getting tougher and tougher to be mitigating forces. And so you have Dodd-Frank, you have these other regulatory things that are trying to put checks on that ever-increasing amount of power. And I don't know what the right answer is short of the gospel. But I look at Dodd-Frank and just say, my goodness, it's not, I don't think, making us that much safer. And quite frankly, it's good. It's been good for us because now a lot of people just throw their hands up and say, I don't even want to try this on my own. I need an expert. But it's not, I don't think it's the right answer, because what you're doing is you're creating such a law that it's putting a higher and higher premium on really, really smart people who can figure out, back to the lawyers, back to the smartest people I know are international tax attorneys. They're just the smartest people. And
most exciting.
And most exciting. Because they figured out how to navigate a phenomenally complex system.
Wow.
And so you get Dodd-Frank, you get these kind of regulatory things that are making that more difficult. You have other attorney generals, like in New York, he's tried it, since he can't indict people because they're not really breaking the law, he's tried shame, take people out in handcuffs. Maybe that'll shame them into actually acting a little better. But, the real question is, what does it take? And in one way, you could say, I think it takes Christians who have the power of the gospel to restrain themselves. Wow. And it's, when you see how big and powerful the financial services is, and again, I'm careful. I'm in one niche, sales and trading, of this one little niche, so I can't speak to all of these other things. I see what happens in over-the-counter derivatives. And I just see the way that power is so great, and it produces so much wealth and so much continuing power.
Christians who have been so transformed by the gospel that they can restrain themselves. And I'm struck too that you describe yourself as having first grown very legalistic, which it's not the same thing maybe as the laws and regulations that sort of try to.
I grew up was close to Dodd-Frank.
It was like a Christian Dodd-Frank. And what transformed you was something that came from outside of that and was much deeper, ultimately.
Yes,
and it's
transformative.
Wow, and that's enabled you to swim. Thank you for sharing this with us. Thank you.